Welcome back to our delicious conversation with Juliane Taylor Shore. She is a therapist, a teacher, an author, and ex-mechanic, recovering mechanic, who's now in the mechanics of your brain and the neuroscience of your brain, and particularly about complex trauma. But really what we're talking about here is change. Is it possible? Because that's a great debate. There's been a great debate as can people actually change? Certainly in the last 20, 25 years, we've talked about neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to adapt and to change. Neurons that fire together, wire together, but neurons that no longer fire together, no longer wire together, meaning that there's not always the same thing. But stopping that jump across that spark plug that is across the synapse that has you run down that path, breaking that is sometimes the very difficult thing. And please understand, we're not talking about some bullshit positive thinking. We're talking about neuroscience here and how you do it. But there's a pretty good chance, and this is in fairness to you, the listener, no matter how wonderful you think your childhood was, you had needs that were not met. That's not because you had a bad mom and dad. You might have had, but it's also because it's not possible to meet all your needs as a child. Those needs that are not met, sometimes they're not met from your lack of understanding because you're too young. Sometimes those needs are not met, become this idea of a trauma. And that's when somebody who is a little more tough will say, well, suck it up, buttercup. That's not the answer either. It's about understanding it. And the work that Jules does is helping you to understand that trauma is, first of all, subjective. Your trauma is not my trauma, and I cannot measure mine against yours. But what is important is in understanding the subjectivity of it is I've got to work on my brain. You've got to work on your brain. And then there's the next stage of that, which is you don't live on an island. You're in relationship with other people. So trauma bumping into trauma, love, connection, all those wonderful things too. But you're bumping into each other's trauma and you're triggering, quote unquote, each other to go back into this phase of being hyper-vigilant, hyper-aware, and paying attention. So now we come to, all right, let's take this into the relationship side. And by that, please understand, we're not just talking about romantic relationship. It might be you're the CEO and your CFO you'd love to strangle on a Tuesday afternoon, or your COO just doesn't get it, or your whoever doesn't quite get it. The person who answers to you directly doesn't quite get it. Talk to us about the relational side of this, Jules, because I think this is a really important thing, because it's very easy for it to feel like I got to fire this person because they're impossible.
Of course. Yeah. And that's a less integrated brain state most of the time. I'm not saying don't fire them. Maybe you need to fire them. I have no idea. I don't do your job. But a lot of the time that comes out of that reactivity rather than responsiveness. So the first thing we have to think about when it comes to being in a relationship with anybody is, their brain is scanning for potential threat 4 to 5 times per second. And my brain is scanning for potential threat 4 to 5 times per second. Can I have any influence over what that scan perceives?
Right.
Turns out you can if you can trust yourself with your own boundaries.
So explain that, because again, if you're from a complex trauma background, you've learned not to trust yourself.
Totally. That's like part of the nature of it.
So you trust the signal, this is a threat, but you don't trust yourself even with the signal because the signal's crazy and you go, last time this was stupid. This is the interesting thing about boundaries. Oftentimes people miss the really, like, this was a fucking red light. Could you not see the red light? You drove right through it and you ended up living in a relationship for 7 years with somebody who was terrible for you and you didn't see the red light. And
I saw them all. Oh, can I talk about my own? I saw every one of them and could not make my mouth say the word no. I write about this because I need to live into this. We write about what we need. Therapist, heal thyself. I write about the work I need to practice and practice and practice and practice. And I don't know. What's coming to me right now is how much agency boundary work has given me over changing subconscious perceptions. I'm not kidding. Not agency in the moment, but agency over time.
So explain that to us.
Yeah. So subconscious perceptions are those ones that are happening like that, right? Poof, so fast. Over time, part of the assessment has become, oh, Jules says no now. I'm a woman, so this stuff happens to us all the time. I'm in the grocery store, minding my own business, and the guy won't stop following me down the aisle. And the guy comes up and brushes up against me and will not give my body space. This just happens. It's just part of being a woman in this world. Now, my assessment is not only one of threat, it's one of threat enough, but I also have the skills that I've built over time to know what my physical boundary needs are, and then to speak up for them, including going and finding other assistants that I now even know might be there because of all the boundary work I've done.
Right.
And so I think, like, if we drop it into like a business relationship, for example, I have business people all the time come and do boundary work with me because they're having threat responses in meetings, but they don't even realize that. They just know, Jules, my meeting's a shit show. Can you help it not be a shit show? And I start breaking it down and looking at it and realizing, oh, this person is having a threat response and now they're getting reactive. Oh, yes, we can put some boundary work between you and yourself to put a pause between judgment and believing the judgment. I think of boundaries in a lot of different levels. There's the normal one you hear about, like, no, don't touch me. In fact, I'm going to move away from you now. There's that kind of boundary, the executed boundary where we like do a thing. But there's also all these internal boundaries. A psychological boundary. Can I keep my mind safe from your mind? Can I keep your mind safe from my mind? Or a containing boundary. Can I put a pause between what I feel and what I do, what I think and what I believe, so that I have time to live into my integrity? Can I put that boundary at such speed it can keep up with the quarter of a second threat response? It turns out you can if you know how to work with your brain.
Right. So let's go to that first. How do you do that?
Yeah, which one?
How do you create that pause?
Let's talk about the pause. I love it.
I talk a lot in my work about you have to develop a pause. And pause is not something you go, oh, I'll create a pause. You actually have to train yourself. So train us how to create the pause because we feel so reactive, whether it's externally expressed or internally.
Sometimes it's only internally expressed. I'm one of those who used to just beat the crap out of myself. It would be from trigger, or I don't really like that word, pulling on the implicit thread of judgment to Jules is a POS in a second. It doesn't do that anymore. So first of all, we have to know that all of these threads that are being pulled, all these associations your brain is making are fast. And so we're going to start with our pause by hooking into a very fast part of your brain. It turns out something called, this is a fancy neuroscience word, basal ganglia, which does procedural movement. So it does things like riding a bike, walking up a staircase. It does all that stuff, but it also does emotional meaning of movement. So if I gave you a thumbs up sign, you don't have to think, what does Jules mean with that hand signal? You don't have to have that thought. That part of your lower brain, your subconscious brain, just knows what that means. Same is true if I gave you a fist bump gesture at a gym. Same is true if I held out my hand for a handshake. We're going to hook into that part of your brain, and we're going to activate the upper part to come and join along all at the same time. So what we need to do is understand something about neurochemicals here. So you've got excitatory neurochemicals and inhibitory neurochemicals. Excitatory lights your brain on fire, which can be a great thing or a really hard thing, depends on how much fire you got. And you've got the soothing, like calming, calm it down. And you could calm it down fast and shut everything down, or you could calm it down slow and still have all that juicy aliveness in you. So we want to do the calm it down slow kind. I live here in the West. I'm in Austin, Texas. Growing up in the States, I learned self-compassion was super dumb. So I'm about to tell you something about the neuroscience of compassion. And if you are out there listening going, wait, this is woo-woo, I am with you with that stress. Do you talk a lot about compassion in your work?
In my work, absolutely. It's vital, especially self-compassion.
Self-compassion, which can be really challenging for bunches of us who grew up thinking that made us weak.
Yes.
Or that it was woo-woo dumb.
Right.
Or that strong people didn't need it.
Yep. And it's important, before you go any further, for everybody to get, there's a distinction between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Those are three very different things, but they become interchangeable words in the lexicon of normal language, but they're very different.
It's silly because actually neurobiologically, they are super, super different.
Right. So talk to us about compassion.
So compassion, whether it's towards someone, you're receiving it, or you're receiving it from yourself, is going to send GABA, which is an inhibitory neurochemical. It just goes shh to your lower brain. Specifically, the parts of your brain that do fear processing, interoceptive, fancy word for inside your body, pain processing, and the meaning of fear and meaning of pain. So if you would like to calm down your fear center, your pain center, and your meaning of fear and pain center, compassion is the way. Empathy is not the way. Sympathy is not the way. In fact, that'll make it worse. It is excitatory, both of those. So what we need is compassion. And I need a movement that my basal ganglia, that's that fancy lower fast brain that knows what a thumbs up means. We need that part of your brain to know a gesture that remembers compassion.
Oh, beautiful.
If you are a person who has trouble with self-compassion, start with compassion towards someone else. And just turn on your compassion network towards someone else, and then you can start redirecting it towards yourself later on. So you could think about your kid or your nephew, and what if they fell down and it was even their own fault? I have a child, Stella. They're so great. But I'm thinking about this moment. She was 3, and she's running while looking behind her and smacks right into a wall. I said, "Oh, baby, what happened?" She goes, "I was not focused." Poor sweetie. So like that feeling that I have towards her in that moment. Oh, that's the feeling. I want you to feel in your body and then find a gesture that reminds you of that feeling, or you could grab hold of and go, yeah, that could mean that thing. For me, it's really simple. Mine's a hand to my heart, but I'm girly and I'm a woman with a lot of dude energy. Honestly, I have some softness that feels really normal to me. But here are some that people have come up with in the past. I'm working with a gentleman right now who does a half heart with his hand. I have somebody who wanted something really subtle and rubs their finger and thumb together, just teeny tiny. I have some folks who want to have like an opening, and so they do like a hands open gesture, like they were trying to hold water in their hands. I have somebody I worked with who's a musician, and all their songs are about love and kindness, and they do a movement with their fingers like on their guitar. I have somebody who put their hand on their belly, like to hold themselves back, because they think of their rage in their belly, and sometimes it'll take them over, and they just want to say, "I see you." And so that gesture means for them, oh, it's an "I see you" energy. Not even a kindness, not even a love gushy. "I see you" was enough. And that was fine. So we want to gesture and compassion, and we weave them together. And if you practice that 4 to 5 times a day for 3 weeks, you will hone a brand new neural network that knows what that gesture means.
I love this. And by the way, I love it because I've done it and I do it and I teach it to my clients. So you create some neuroassociation to a movement that the nerve cells in that, whatever it is. So for me, you would never know, but what I'm doing is I'm holding my hand and I'm just rubbing my nail across from the bottom here to there. That's a feeling of complete love. That moment of like, oh my God, I'm so in love with this moment. And it works. And you can do it by squeezing the end of your fingernail, particularly if it has a nerve response to it, it will trigger fast. Then you've got stuff like breathing you can do and all those things. But oftentimes it's hard to remember those. What I just loved about what you said is you can train this by thinking that thing for 2 or 3 seconds, doing the movement 2 or 3, 4 times a day. And then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I know how to do this.
Oh, that gesture means that. Is it okay if I share a story from somebody I worked with who did this? So this person created this like rubbing fingers and thumb together. And they are with their spouse picking up from airport. This is them coming back together, has all sorts of those associations we're talking about. Both of them are on edge. And their partner said something. The whole thing was about to go sideways. And they've been doing this for about 6 months.
Mm.
And they look down and their hand is doing this without them trying.
Right.
And they went, oh yeah, I'm supposed to pause between what I feel and what I do. And there's a little bit of that kindness towards them and towards their partner.
Yes.
It doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take intention and a willingness to say yes to the commitment. On the back end of that gesture, you have a couple of keywords that remind you of your value system. What you're going to do is turn on the prefrontal cortex where your moral reasoning comes back in. And so what we're going to do is go bottom of the brain, create the pause, top of the brain, remind me who I am.
Oh, lovely.
So I have people come up with 2 words. One is for who do I want to be in my personal integrity? And the other is who do I want to be in relationship?
Can you give us an example? That's really good.
Yeah, totally. So I wonder, how vulnerable do you want to feel today, Dov?
I'm willing to feel totally vulnerable. I'll go anywhere you need to go.
Is it okay if we do it together?
Sure, absolutely.
We can do it live.
Beautiful.
Okay. So I wonder if you could picture yourself in a moment that was challenging and that you handled really well. You look at that moment and you go, oh yeah, that is the guy I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
You got one?
I do.
Okay. Could you tell me 4 or 5 words that would describe that human?
Oh, absolutely. Curious, kind, compassionate. Curious, kind, loving.
Loving, curious, kind, compassionate, loving. Okay. And now, could you imagine like a picture of that person, or if it's okay with you, he can be alive in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
Just ask him, curious, kind, compassionate, loving. Is there a single word or small phrase that can remind me of all of that all at once?
Bear. B-E-A-R.
B-E-A-R, bear. So that would be your personal integrity word, bear.
Beautiful.
So then here's how we do our relational intention word. We're going to have 3 pictures. Ready? Okay, so the first one is you're working with somebody who has a powered down relationship from you. Could be a client, a kid.
Sure.
And you're showing up awesome in that situation. Yes, that is the kind of person I want to be in relationship with, that human.
Mm-hmm.
You got it?
Yes.
Take a snapshot of it, set that aside. Now come up with one that is you in a relationship with a stranger. and you're showing up awesome relationally,
Mhm.
but you don't know this person,
Right.
an acquaintance or somebody you don't know at all.
Yep.
Yep. Got it.
Mhm.
Take a snapshot of that, put it to the side.
Mhm.
Now in a peer relationship with somebody you're close to, like a partner, could be your wife, could be a best friend, and you're awesome in that moment. That is who I want to be in a relationship.
Yes.
Yep. Take a snapshot of that. Now lay all 3 photos out in front of yourself.
Yep.
Is there a word or phrase that all 3 have in common?
Curious.
Curious. So there's your relational intention word.
Mhm.
Yeah. So then, you have that movement where
Mhm.
you do, it's a thumb, right? You
Yep.
do this.
Thumb.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thumb across.
Yep. You do a thumb thing. So you bring your hands together, you do the thumb thing. So you do that.
By the way, I just got what I call a love surge. And a love surge is, I now know what it is because I did the scientific research on it. It's a flood of oxytocin and dopamine that comes for me when I feel those things. Like right now, I could cry. Right now, I could cry because I'm in that space.
Oh, Dov, thank you for sharing it with me and with everybody. Exactly. That's what this does. So you do this, you remember the pause, and then you go bear, curious, and you just remind yourself of the words. And even inside of really hard moments, inside of that hard board meeting, inside of that horrible situation with the CFO, inside of that hard situation with a client, if you work with clients, you do that and you get that love surge. And that's exactly what's happening. You're getting an oxytocin from the bottom of the brain and a GABA from the top, and you just sandwiched your brain in kind neurochemical.
Beautiful. What a great practicality. That is so good.
Thank you.
That's awesome. This is a very practical thing, but the practicality of application is a different thing. And what I mean by that is, how do I hold myself accountable to doing that when I want to tear the head off the other person?
Right.
Because in that reactive mode, I know I should be rubbing my nail across my hand, and I should be remembering bear, and I should be remembering curiosity, and all shoulds. And meanwhile, I just bit somebody's head off.
Totally. So the first thing I would say is practice after the fact.
Right.
So let's say you've had a really hard moment go down. Go back over the moment in your mind and start putting in that movement, those words, earlier and earlier and earlier in the situation. There are a couple things that are probably happening. One is you haven't practiced enough in real life yet. That doesn't mean it's not going to work. It just means you haven't practiced enough yet. And we're going to keep practicing in real life. And it could be you're not practicing it soon enough. You are not catching how early your brain is going into threat. By the time you are that level flooded, you actually found threat 5 minutes ago. So we want to get good at going back over moments that went wrong. I'm putting that in quotes because I don't think they actually went wrong. I think they're understandable, but you want to do better. Good. Let's do better.
That awareness is the challenge because, as you said, we're under threat 4 to 5 times a second, or we're aware of looking for threat 4 or 5 times a second.
Right.
And the challenge, particularly with people who have complex trauma, is they don't read threat very well, meaning
right,
everything's a threat or nothing's a threat. So they're riding through the red light, pretending it's green, even though they can see it's red, as you said, or everything's a threat. So that's where we come to the practicality now of like, oh, this is great tools and they're fantastic, but I can't get to applying them because I don't know.
Yeah. So the first thing I have people do is start applying it all the time, regularly, when you're not in threat. Start to do that practice. And it's a 2 to 5 second practice. It's not actually asking a lot, but many times a day for several weeks. Then start going over situations that have already happened and start actually pausing inside of that moment and do the gesture in your memory. So we're creating a deliberate practice to start using it in real life. Then start doing it earlier than you think you need inside your deliberate practice of something that already happened. Then start using it in more minor situations in real life in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to worry about whether or not it's starting to be able to be used when you're high reactive. So think of it as like scaffolding yourself.
Yes.
That you have to build up this scaffold to really have this change. And here's the cool thing about this scan for threat is the scan is for threat and or safety. It's an assessment.
Yes.
It's happening. So the hard news is you're scanning for threat 4 to 5 times a second. The good news is you're scanning for safety 4 to 5 times per second too. And if your brain scan keeps picking up, you're doing this thing to give yourself a chance to live into your integrity, your self-trust will start rocketing up. And some of those scans are going to go, whoa, that was surprising. Jules is standing up for herself. Or, whoa, that was surprising. I didn't think it was okay to say no in a situation like that. I thought fawning was the only way to get through a situation like that. Wait a second. And so it's putting the practices into action. This is why I say boundary work is actually love for self and love for other work in action. Is I treat you like you are deserving of respect and clarity. And I treat me like I am deserving of clarity and respect too.
Yeah.
And then myself, I'm receiving that. And then I go, wait, I'm not a piece of shit. I'm actually worthy of respect. That's weird.
That's fantastic. So if it's okay with you, and it's okay with you, dear listener, we're going to go to part 3 of the show because we can dive into it a little bit deeper. I want to talk really about this misconception of boundaries, what boundaries actually are versus what we think they are. I want to talk about the difference between boundaries and rules because there's a hell of a difference and most people don't know. And then boundaries based on self-value as well as other value and what we can do with that. So we're going to be back for another part 3, a special episode with Jules. We're going to be back for more of that with Juliane Taylor Shore, our special guest. More about that in just one click. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. We're coming back for even more.